We're back. We've had a bit of a break, a bit of a sabbatical. John went on his travels westwards, like the pioneer that he is, to America earlier this year, and I went eastwards at the same time to Australia, and now we're back again here in Bakewell for another conversation with John Butler. Thank you for all your comments on the YouTube channel. They're very welcome. We do our best to respond to all of them, so keep them coming. And some folks, they've asked about where can they get hold of a copy of John's books. Well, if you go to www.spiritualunfoldment, all one word, .co.uk. John made that word up, by the way, unfoldment. You won't find it in the dictionary. www.spiritualunfoldment.co.uk. You will find wonders of spiritual unfoldment and mystic approaches. And John has just put the last dots and crosses on his latest book, O Russia, which will be out shortly. More of that later. Our topic for today, John, is something that's dear to your heart. No awkward questions or quizzes today. We're going to focus on the topic of silence. So that's it. We're not going to say anything. No. There's a whole book, not one of your books, on this subject. Sarah Maitland wrote a book called The Book of Silence, and she identifies 7 types of silence, and I thought I'd put you on the spot and ask you to identify. See how it's not a quiz. You don't have to make up 7 different types of silence, but just to comment on the nature of silence for you.
Well, I don't know how anybody finds 7 kinds of silence. I think I only know one.
In which case it'll be a short interview, which is fine. So tell us about this one type of silence.
Well, it's here. What can one say about it? It's the most obvious fact of just being present here. First of all, there's silence, and then into that silence there's the sound of a distant motor car passing, and my voice. First of all, there's the sounds, and then there's the movement. I can see your eyes blinking, sound of my breathing, but nothing changes the silence. The silence is unchanging. The silence, sometimes refer to the stillness or the presence, is the most fundamental fact of existence.
The silence got there first.
Well, sort of words like first and last become rather meaningless, don't they? It's just what is. Go into it as deeply as you like to try to find the beginning. It just becomes, in a way, more silent. Perhaps in answer to your question, just thinking of it in more human terms, because strange though it may seem, some people find it difficult to be silent, and they're even frightened by it. And for such people, even to stop talking for a few minutes is quite an achievement. Well, there you get a glimpse of silence. But of course, there are depths and depths and depths of silence, which I suppose you could graduate into, give it different names. Some people are more naturally silent than others. I suppose those people that practice meditation gradually become more and more accustomed to silence, never deeper and deeper silence. It's like every aspect of what we call the infinite, it has no end. It's an exploration and adventure with no end. And it isn't adventure, it's not a static, dead thing, surprisingly.
John, is it a silence of absence of noise, or is it a silence of presence?
Oh no, it's not absence, because see, silence includes everything. See, silence is all inclusive. This is a great mistake that people make. That they think people like me that meditate are in some way cutting out the rest of them, cutting out the world and the more, the struggling of suffering world. No way at all. What happens is that it's an infinite inclusiveness, an all embracement.
My favourite mystic, apart from you of course, Meister Eckhart, 14th century I think, he says, I'm not sure about the translation, I'll paraphrase, there is nothing in the whole universe closer to God than silence.
Well, amen to that. Yes, the trouble is, if you use words like love, it's almost impossible not to bring in human interpretations of it. Same with bliss and happiness. Whereas silence is something that's almost by definition it implies that at least we stop using words, we stop talking, which is a step in the right direction.
Maybe there is a language of silence. We are, of course, as social beings, gifted with, most of us, with a language that we learn, or several languages that we learn. So, if you like, the first level of silence, you might be to stop speaking.
Well, and in a way, it is a language, isn't it? Because that often enables people to come close to you, and certainly it does with animals. If you just are quiet, it's amazing how an animal may. If you want to see wild animals, the first thing to do is to be quiet, isn't it? Just sit quietly.
I remember we were in the fields up at Colton last summer with Dina, and there was a herd of cows which Dina was a little nervous about, to say the least, and you simply went and first of all stood quietly, motionless, and they backed off, and then you lay down quietly in silence, and Dina was filming you. And then after a couple of minutes of just lying there, do you remember what happened?
Yes, they came up and sniffed me. They're curious. but see, they're not threatened. If you see a sheep grazing in the field, a rabbit isn't frightened of a sheep, vice versa. Why are they frightened of me? Well, it's a good question to ask yourself. But at least if you stop talking, you're not quite such a threat. And if you lie down and becomes smaller than the animal, at least not looking down on them in that dominating way, once again you're not so frightening, are you?
So there's the silence of not speaking, that's a human thing. I suppose sheep can bleat and cows can moo, but there's the absence of speaking. What about the silence of course, there's not only words on the outside or on your tongue. There's words on the inside in your mind, more or less constantly.
Oh yes, it's very subtle indeed. There's this inner language, and to reach a state of a silent, a quiet mind is, of course, an important step on the spiritual path. Bring the mind to rest, and then indeed you are a step in the right direction, a very big step.
And how do we do that?
You have to let go, but to let go you have, first of all, well, that's the technique of meditation, of effective meditation. You're given a mantra or something, and if you follow that, then you're helped to let go of these obsessive thoughts that are, half of them we're not even aware of, they're just subconscious. That's the trouble, and it's a long process over many years of revealing ever more of this corruption within oneself.
For those of us who are unfamiliar with the term mantra, just talk us through that.
If people start to meditate, particularly if they haven't been properly taught, if you just try to sit quiet, the first thing you notice is that you're thinking, and it's almost impossible to stop thinking. You substitute one thought and there's another, and they can just drive you completely nuts. So that's why people give up after a while and get on with doing something that makes them feel more at ease with themselves. Well, how do you deal with these thoughts? That's the big question of meditation. But if a mantra is usually a word, some sort of word that gives you a mental focus, rather like a mental handrail. And by holding on to this, it helps you to divert attention away from your own thinking process. And if you don't attend to it, well, it naturally just subsides of itself. And you begin to discover that there is a possibility of being free of thoughts, and that's quite a realization. And the mantra will just gently continue, and will, if you follow the mantra, you can get relief from these so often obsessive thoughts.
Does it matter what the mantra is?
Well, some people will be insistent that their own favourite is the best, of course. There are many different mantras, and at this stage I wouldn't. Most of them are in some way related to one of many names of God that's used throughout the world, and are mostly of a very ancient lineage. Those are the traditional mantras. Other people just would pick up a phrase of some sort that seems to be leading them in the right direction. But this is quite a subject in itself, meditation. I was taught, and I've always been led to believe that the safest and best way to venture onto the path of meditation is to find a qualified teacher.
What about being self-taught, for example, through books? There are many books on the subject.
Well, many people do follow that path. The one thing that is required, in my experience, above all in meditation, is practice, persistent practice. I've been meditating for well over 50 years, twice a day for 50 years. People always, of course, want quick results, don't they? They think you can just read a few books, sit down, go on a course or something, go on some sort of retreat, and you'll find inner peace. It's not really as simple as that, because we are so, especially people who are of any age, we're so conditioned to think in terms of our own separate ego. It is not easy to overcome it all. It needs a lot of patient practice, in my experience.
I might be a little left field this, but it sounds to me if it's the result, if our busy minds are the result of conditioning and our social environment, which it is, and these things, the devices that we clutch to ourselves 24/7 these days, we'd be better off remaining feral children.
Well, there have always been certain characters throughout history that chose that path, and I did myself when I was a young man.
You were feral?
Well, as near as I could get to it. Avoiding society, but I'm not sure that sooner or later we tend to get drawn back into it again. I'm not sure really how long it may work for a while. I don't think it did me any harm, but I think, perhaps you grow through that phase, because as I said before, you see, this great silence, it's not exclusive of human troubles. In fact, that's only what's called the first line of the work, in the sense of spiritual work. When we work for ourselves, for our own advantage, for our own salvation, the next line of the work is to work with and for other people, and that includes taking on board all the troubles of the world and finding the peace that includes them and holds them in peace. And then there's a third level of work, which is for the love of the work itself, when you don't even think of results. You just surrender to the greatness of what one begins to discover. It is really the work of love.
And what's the nature of the silence at that third stage?
The nature of, well, the moment you start talking about nature, you slip down into the level of duality, because you're in the world of name and form. But just to answer your question, because otherwise I would just be silent. but an answer that may satisfy yourself and listeners, maybe you can call it love, the work of love. For love's sake only.
So, whittling it down, I could say then, love is silence.
Well, what is love? Who can say what love is? And this again is a very productive line of inquiry. If you ask yourself, what is love? Or what is freedom? Or what is happiness? Love, freedom, happiness, was something else. Life, yes, of course. What is life? Well then, pursue that line of inquiry, and you'll find that, lo and behold, you may come to what we're talking about.
Woody Allen says, God is silent. Why can't we humans just shut up?
Well, amen to that. And certainly one of the first steps to any serious spiritual work is to stop talking. It's funny, people go on courses, of course, and then of course they listen to lectures and that, and you and I are talking, but hopefully through our conversation those who are listening and watching to this will catch some sort of a flavour that it's the really significant thing about what you and I are endeavouring to put on this video is a taste of silence.
Why is the mind so noisy? Who's in charge of the ship anyway? I mean, why can't we just sit down and if we think we're the boss, why don't we just instruct ourselves to switch off like a computer or this camera?
Why can't we?
Yeah.
Well, because we haven't been taught, because we're not very clever. But actually nothing could be more natural. And when you say the mind, why doesn't the mind stop talking? Because we're only using a little bit of the mind. The mind is much more than just talking and thinking. Think of the reflective mind. What is it, for example, that appreciates beauty? What is it that brings tears to our eyes? Or smile? You walk along the road, you meet someone's eyes, and you involuntarily smile at each other. There's no thinking involved. A lot of things happen that don't involve thinking. At this moment now, I'm not thinking. I'm just waiting for either you to say something or for something to arise from myself. A lot of thinking is really out of control, isn't it? It's mind out of control. If you carefully attend to something, even just something as simple as, for example, cutting a slice of bread, and just watch the knife slicing through the bread. At that moment, the chances are you're not thinking. You're just attending to what you're doing. When you clean your teeth in the morning, just aware of what you're doing. Chances are you're not thinking. There are lots of moments during the day when we don't think. I remember at school, we used to, going to chapel was compulsory then. So I learnt many of the passages from scripture. And one of the ones I loved was, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall run and not be weary, or they shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Sorry, I've said it a bit wrong, but anyway, you get the gist of it. They that wait upon the Lord. And that's really what I'm talking about, this waiting. I'm waiting for you to ask me something to say so I know what to say next. And this waiting for something to happen, this waiting. And funny enough, you realise that you're silent then, aren't you? That's another way of entering more deeply into the silence. And if you're waiting for someone just to whisper, or listening to the faintest sound of a bird, or listening to the furthest sound, or even listen to the grass grow, or listen to the wind stirring the barley, now then, you're wonderfully, you could call that mind expectant, couldn't you? The quiet mind. The mind's very open and receptive, isn't it, indeed? How much greater is its function then than when it's just busy talking about me, little me? What is it that stops us going deeper? Well, it's me, isn't it? is this obsession with me as a personality, as a separate entity. Now then, to listen deeply, you find you forget about it. It just goes out of the picture. And somehow you become less a body. I mean, just sitting here, I've almost forgotten I've got a body. Forgotten what I look like. Forgotten my age. It's not so difficult to forget me, this separate ego which is at the root of all our unhappiness and our troubles, our loneliness, and somehow merge into this greater awareness. And the deeper we do that, the greater the freedom, the greater the love. There's nothing that is not included in this love, is there? Nothing. Every grain of dust, let alone a human seed. And somehow it's complete, isn't it? At this moment now, I need nothing. I am complete. I'm not an old man about to die at all. I'm timeless. Timeless. I don't even have a dimension, do I? It's dimensionless. Timeless, spaceless, infinite being. Pure consciousness. And lo and behold, if I'm not my separate body, not my old man's personality, what am I? Well, by elimination I must be this, mustn't I?
Could you say, therefore, that silence is the absence of noise caused by separation?
Yes, I think that's totally accurate.
I'm quite pleased with that.
Well, you could also say, I think if you're very clever, that silence actually includes this performance of separate entity, doesn't it? You could actually, rather like looking in the mirror, you can wink at yourself, can't you? You can see this funny face looking out at you, and you can, and that sort of deeper part of yourself can sort of, well, we can laugh at ourselves after we've made a silly remark, can't we?